Welcome to the New Property Show. I'm Steve McManaman. In this show, we're going to close last year with a final say on a variety of issues from many of our guests, including brokers and industry experts. So would you recommend setting up with the same bank, always with these setup accounts, or would you still have a separate online saver account as well, so an absolute backup account, or always with the same bank?
Always with the same bank, always under an offset facility. There is, some people think there's a temptation to spend money if you see it every day. And so we've got to manage that and manage people around that, and that's very much a behavioural issue. So if it is becoming a real issue for people and they are spending all the money they can see in their offset accounts, sure, it has to adapt. We have to adapt to people's lifestyle. But technically what we want is all those accounts being with the same lender, so all of them can be offset accounts.
Okay, so if someone's getting $1,000 a week, they're paying off a mortgage repayment of $500 per week, how does that look? So they're putting $1,000 into savings, and then $500 goes towards a repayment, and then how would you divvy up the rest of the funds?
So again, it's really bespoke. It's really about how someone lives their life. You know, how I spend money and how you spend money, there's going to be similarities, but there's going to be differences. And you know, someone earning $50,000 a year spends vastly different to someone earning $200,000 a year. So it's really, I think it's hard to put hard percentages on things because I think when people have tried to suggested that, budgeting people and people who, you know, money experts, what they've found is it really disenfranchises the people earning less money. So what we want to do is go through an actual budget with someone and say, okay, where are you spending your money? What is the right amount of money to filter through these accounts, rather than just having a one-size-fits-all approach. One size fits all is great for a book, but we've got the benefit and the luxury of sitting down with someone and saying, right, how does this affect you? How do we actually make this work for you?
What would you say to the average household now, how they can actually control their spending, both fixed expenses and variable expenses? What would you suggest to those guys?
Absolutely, good question, Steve. In an economy like this, it's very important a standard household actually spend a little bit more time trying to create a savings plan. The best place to start this is actually through a budget, but not through a traditional budget. We normally suggest our customers to do a budget where they focus on their fixed rate expenses and variable cost expenses. Your fixed cost expenses are the ones that happens regularly. So this could be your mortgage, this could be your rates, this could be your rego, so forth, right? The best way to manage this is always look for the market to find providers where they will provide alternative options. And also find solutions where you may be able to make your payments without too much stress on your monthly cash flow. So for example, your rego, instead of paying annually, maybe talk to the Vic Roads and see if you could pay that quarterly, because in that way it will have less stress on your cash flow. Your variable expenses are the ones that directly related to your lifestyle. So this might be your gym membership, eating out, and also like your subscription with Netflix, Spotify, so forth, right? Maybe try a day in your calendar where you will eat at home rather than going out. So that could be a method.
More date nights, for
example.
More
date nights at home, you know what I mean? So that will allow you to save a little bit more money on your monthly budget.
Okay, and over this time that you've been developing these companies here, have you got some case studies? Have you got some clients that have built some significant wealth now through this type of investing?
So we actually started this with disability housing. There's a lot of talk out there at the moment with NDIS housing. We were doing this 7 years ago. So we've not only learned the good things, but also not so good things. And part of what I'd love your viewers to understand it, there's a lot of pros to investing in NDIS or disability housing, but also a lot of cons. One of the key components is if you're not dealing with a management agency as well, you might as well be throwing your money away. And that's one thing we've done that keeps our clients coming back again and again, is I'm a co-owner of the management agency, which is called Empowered Livability, where probably the largest privately owned disability housing agency in Victoria, and top 5 across the country in terms of revenue.
So your money's safe?
Yes.
So basically, your client can come along, purchase a property from you, get a high yielding property, and know that it's going to be looked after by your company as well.
That's right.
In terms of yielding it out. Last thing would be finance and then resale.
Yes, great question. So It's complicated, right? It's like the Facebook status we used to have once upon a time. It's complicated, right? Finance for like a 4-bedroom house that we do with a shared accommodation, we don't even need to build any significant, engineering into it. We can get away with regular bank lending. 5 and 6 bedrooms, I'd say about 60-70% of the time. But when we get into disability accommodation, if we're building the highest type of yielding product, then it's better to get a commercial valuation on it. And we've got a lender that will lend residential rates through a commercial val. Or if we've got a new product that we've just created, which is kind of like a hybrid of all of our products, you could go to a normal lender. And at the moment, we've got about 4 different valuations that have come in on the dollar.
Sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
Property 2023, going up or down?
Up. We've heard the things where by the time, my prediction is by the time autumn rolls around, we'll see the market stabilise and start heading back up, because guess what? We still have yet to see the impact of immigrants and students in the country.
I think that's very exciting for the product that you're actually releasing as well. Some of the other, I've had a quick look at that behind the scenes, closer to schools and of course universities, I guess looking at hospitals. What's another key criteria there in terms of getting that right tenant there that I may have missed?
Well, the key criteria is knowing your tenant, but also almost letting your tenant design the house, right? So one thing that makes us very unique is that our house is a tenant, or in the terms of NDIS, participant-led. We say, look, here's a design. What is your wish list in the design? And we're reasonable. We actually let them have a hand in designing it, because if you know your tenant, you can get the highest yield ethically.
Fantastic. Sounds great. So what are you doing that's different for the client, first of all, and secondly, would be the agent?
Yeah, first of all, we have the largest collection of street and suburb reviews in Australia. So people are finding us because they may have been priced out of a neighbourhood and don't really know where to go next. Homely's where they come to, because they're asking questions like, what's it like to live in this suburb? What are the best streets in this suburb? And that's where Homely do really well, because we've got locals that are talking about the things that they love about an area, some people about the things that they hate about an area, but everything is real, and it's a great way for people to sort of work out where they want to be, because when you're buying a house, it's one of the most expensive and stressful things that you can do. You want to make sure you're making the right decision, and that's definitely knowing all those bits and pieces. And look, very few people are now making those big decisions, big purchasing decisions, before they have a review or they have someone tell them that it's the right thing to do. So Homely is the only place you can do that. For agents can actually jump on and use our Q&A. So people ask a lot of questions like, what time does the library open? Is there a great cafe nearby? Agents, it's great for them to jump on and become a local expert. So they look like they know the area. Also, they look like they love an area as well. I think people want to be sold to or sold by someone that actually loves their neighbourhood and knows a lot about it. So there's sort of the main points of difference in how people are using them. Yeah.
So I guess it's an Australian-wide website, but they're really feeling quite local to the area in terms of the agents. So with you guys, in terms of listing a property, what's the process there? How do you get a house up on Homely?
Look, you do have to be an agent and have a profile set up on our site. It's very easy. You pretty much log on to our website, homely.com.au, scroll down to the bottom and you add your website, you add your company, and then you can start loading your listings onto our site, whether you use a CRM or a manual loader. It's a very, very easy process.
And from the customer's point of view, there's still some tabs, so you can search a location via map or price point.
Yep, you can.
And then you can sort of, almost like an Airbnb, you can sort of choose between 3-4 bedrooms. What are some of the features there? What are some of people, I guess, in terms of search criteria looking for?
Criteria, number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, land size. Price is obviously the most important one that everyone's looking at, and location. Something that we do really well is the maps on our website. It is really, really easy for you to interact with our maps and find out exactly where you want to look. And it does really help you make the right decision and know where everything is.
Okay, so we've talked about home ownership as well. I was reading earlier that it used to be 16 years. that the typical Aussie family would own a home now. What's it down to?
Look, it's just under 6 points. It's actually 5.87 years.
Yeah.
Don't know where the 87 comes from, but that's where it's at the moment. So what that means is, particularly in new builds, people buy a new home thinking it's their forever home, but like vehicles, it's often a stepping stone to the next. So when we're talking about future-proofing property, buy a home today, imagining that one day you want to sell it and buy a bigger home. Or if you have an investment mindset, ask yourself, if you're going to rent a home, what sort of home would ideally you like for your family? And it's a really interesting thing. People renting homes want to feel the same thing as a homeowner. And it might be that they don't have enough finances in place. But here's the thing, is that if you have a home that's appealing, you'll get more people wanting it. You'll get more people wanting to spend more on it. So you have higher value and higher return. It needs to begin at design stage.
What about garages and that? So cars are getting bigger. So you've got some 300 series out there now, some big patrols. You've got tradies. You've got roof racks. What do you recommend when it comes to the outside in terms of garages? What would you do there?
Smart blocks, blocks that are sort of like 3 to 330 big. The setback from the front of the place is only about 5 or 6 metres. Really, there's only place for one car park. So having a garage where you can actually get an SUV in with a roof rack is really important. But beyond that, contemplate this. Having a garage where you've got a rear access door and a slab that goes beyond it. For tradies, that's handy because they've often got tradie trailers. They can slip it through. People might have a boat or a camper. And so all of a sudden on the same block of land, you're actually opening up the ability for it to have 2 or 3 vehicles or trailers. And so people may not be able to afford the big block, but the space for them. And if you're going to lease a property or sell it, they're really important factors.
All right, so going back to the planning stages, just last one, then we'll flip back over to getting the most amount of resale. If you were to pull a house back, and you've gone and you've heard here, I've interviewed a lot of builders, land developers and clients on the show. If you're to pull it back and you're going to save some money on the build and you're going to invest the money now on the inside, where would you start?
Look, the key thing that I reckon you should have, in your contract, make sure you've got a driveway and you've got footpaths.
Yep.
The things that you could save money on is like having your gardens done. Forget the outside spa or the pool. Most of the states have fences built, but just cut back on all those areas because you can spend 20, 30, 40 grand without even thinking about it. I would much rather take that money, put it into construction, and then over the next 6, 12 months, do the garden yourself.
Silly question, but paying down your home, what's the benefit of that earlier? What's the win?
So, look, if you pay down your debt, that means you've got opportunities. It's all about unleashing opportunities. So you may not pay down your debt fully, but enough to release equity out to buy the next property. Or it might just be that your goal is to be debt free, and that's a great goal if that's the path you choose. And so let's get debt free. So then more of your money, you can live on lifestyle. You can go on those holidays, or you can buy that car that you've always wanted. But it's all about empowering the client to say, what do you want? And we're all about giving less money to the bank and paying down more of your own debt.
Okay, it does trigger a question here. So we've bought the first property.
Yep.
We've now bought a second property.
Yep.
We've called investment number 1.
Sure.
Do we duplicate these piggy banks, or do we go to a same bank again or a separate bank?
Yep.
Would it be better then in that case to have a separate bank so you don't see all the money in one place, or what would you do then?
Absolutely. So we have the investment property in the cheapest loan we can find. It's absolute, money's a commodity, it's the purest commodity, so let's get it away into the cheapest loan we can find. It doesn't need bells and whistles, it doesn't need an offset account. We actually have an offset account for that investment property, which is offsetting your home loan. So while the rent is parked in that offset account, it's actually helping you pay off your home loan. So it actually has a multiplier effect.
So maximising tax benefits,
Absolutely.
therefore paying down your house at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it can really work in a very powerful way. And what we find is that just gets you to property number 3 sooner. And that's what we're about.
Last question.
Sure.
So if a client was to come and see you and have a sit-down analysis, how many meetings they're going to need and how much time invested to set up one of these accounts? Let's say it's quite seamless. but seems like a bit of work to put these piggy banks together. What's the time invested that's required?
So basically, our process is reasonably streamlined. You know, they'll have a discovery meeting with myself and we'll set some strategy. Then I've got a fantastic team of people that actually take them through to settlement, because at the end of the day, we still need to do the home loan. That is a core part of it. Through that process, and depending on the lender that the client chooses, we'll say, okay, you've chosen a Suncorp loan or a Macquarie loan, whatever it might be, this is what you need to do to set up these loans. The offset accounts, we can't set up the offset accounts for the client. We can set up the first one with the loan, but then we instruct the client on how to do that. Usually it's pretty seamless and easy. Most banks now are actually quite good at setting up accounts for you. Most of them can be done on an app. It's more about the planning of how many accounts you want, and then going back to your former bank and just getting those direct debits directed over to your new banking. So depending on how complex your stuff is, really it's a couple of hours, I suppose, but that couple of hours is going to save you thousands.
Beautiful, some great tips. And I think with that said, even before they've even seen you, even if they're 6 to 12 months out, having that conversation, maybe getting some savings accounts set up in the meantime.
Absolutely.
And getting used to the savings, spending, thrift, small accounts, which would be great.
Absolutely.
Some really great tips there. Thank you, Rory, and thanks for joining us on the New Property Show.
Thanks so much for having me. Ta.
And how are you looking after your clients long term? So with property, we've typically got about a 9 to 12 month turnaround.
Yes.
You've settled on a property, and that client's going to be building wealth over time. When should they be checking in with a broker?
I would say the good brokers that really look after their clients well are checking in every 6 months, and we do that at our company, especially with these rate rises going on. At least every 12 months you should be re-engaging and seeing what's going on. What we're finding is that this cashback culture that the banks have fostered is creating a lot of churn in the industry. We're very lucky because our clients are quite loyal. Legal professionals prefer to deal with the devil they know, but other brokers, people are like refinancing every 6 months because they just want that cash back. We're very careful of the clients we onboard. And if someone is asking for a $6,000 cash back up front and they're coming from a broker after only 3 months, we say, perhaps we're not for you, madam, or what have you. So people that want to grow their wealth, we've had a client that started with us when they were 2 or 3 years in law. Now they've got 7 properties and they've come back to us every time because we're in it for the long term for them.
Experience matters.
Correct.
Sean, what's the pros and cons of private lending?
Yeah, so the main benefit of private lending is that, again, the speed that the private lender can turn the loan around at. So again, if you have a short settlement that you need to meet within a couple of days, this is where the private lender can really shine because of their less assessment criteria. They can turn around a lot faster, and the borrower can most likely save their 5 or 10% deposit they've already paid for the property. So that's one of the big benefits. So the second benefit, I guess, is it comes to the borrower building a relationship with that particular lender or the private investor. If they do need to borrow again down the track or roll over that loan, once it's come to a maturity to extend the term or something like that.
Beautiful. And what about the cons?
Well, one of the main disadvantages of a private lend is, I would say, that it's obviously a lot more expensive. So like we said before, the interest rate is typically between 11 to 13% per annum. On top of that, there's fees such as establishment fees, engagement fees, line management fees, legal fees, compared to a traditional bank lend.
So let's say, for example, we've bought a property for $750,000, including stamp duty, settlement costs, everything's included. With that said, and hypothetically the property's in Werribee, which is in West Melbourne, what do we look at from there?
We're going to look at is the rental income above the expenses? And for it to be a cash flow positive property, we want to see that. And in this case, we can assume that it would be. And if we look at a property over a 2, 3, 5 year period and upwards of 10 years, that's what we want to be measuring for these cash flow positive properties. We want to be taking the cash that we generate from the properties, putting it into our offset account, paying down the loan, looking at some form of cash savings, to then look at investing that in other investments later, or maybe even just taking it towards and putting it off your actual home loan that you live in. So when we do this, we want to compound the growth of that high cash yielding property and make sure that we're able to leverage off that in the future.
With that said, if we bought a capital growth property for the same amount, $750,000, it's in Werribee, we're ready, we're settled, ready to go, we've got a little bit more of a higher income behind us, why would we buy a capital growth property, and what's that going to look like in 10 years?
One thing I've noticed with the accounting firm and all the different clients we've had is that when personal circumstances come into it and you're using a negative gearing property, you might have to touch into your wages that you earn. You might have to rely on other income sources. And with the cash flow positive properties, you don't have to. So with our portfolio and how we built it, we don't want to be forced into selling a property at the worst time. We want to be able to make the decisions of when it's the right time to sell it and to sell it at that point. So with this type of property, we want to go compounding the rent, look at it every year increasing by 3%, look at the expenses every year, they increase by 3%, but the interest wouldn't in a cash flow positive property. It'd be paying down the loan. So after a 10-year period, on the example that we have up on the board, we'd be looking at a $550,000 estimated net position off a $750,000 purchase, which is pretty amazing when you consider the amount of money per year that could equate to.
What would you normally recommend in terms of savings put aside? I've suggested to clients in the past to at least have a buffer of up to $10,000 for repayment, so just have that in a separate account. Do you think that's a fair amount nowadays? Or?
Absolutely. Yeah. But also what I tell a lot of people is make it a percentage of your cost. So if you could get at least about 5% of your construction or the land and the whole cost as a savings buffer, that would be a really good amount to work with. Because we are in the economy, we don't know where we're going to go ahead with the interest rates. So ANZ and Westpac saying interest rate would be 1% higher. So it's better to have some savings buffer in order to actually face these circumstances.
There is a few new schemes that are out though too. So for example, you've got first home buyers grants, you've got low deposit schemes. Do you want to just quickly rattle off what some of those schemes might be so that people can actually research those to see if there's other incentives out there that can help them get into the market earlier?
Yeah. So there are a number of opportunities and actually benefits given by the government in order to help and boost the market, as well as help these first home owner buyers, right? My best suggestion here is work with your bank or the broker to find what works best for you. Also, there are lenders who provide benefits to the first home owner buyers. For example, Bank of Melbourne, they're doing 85% without LMI if it's your first property. So there are a lot of options. So it's very important you talk to your broker or your banker and finding the best solution that works for you.
I think that's great. Actually, I've learned something there. So banks have been a little bit more lenient and flexible there in terms of the lender's mortgage insurance.
Yep.
That's just quite a significant saving, just let alone. That could be $5,000 to $10,000. The last thing, I guess you've been in broking now for a while. Pre-approval, is that still relevant nowadays, or
absolutely?
What would you suggest?
Yeah. It depending on the bank. So this is where you really need to use the services of a broker. Depending on the bank, the pre-approval conditions are different. For example, Commonwealth Bank, they will honor their pre-approvals for 90 days. So that's something where we are actually using to help our clients. But then some banks don't honor their pre-approvals. So before you do a pre-approval, it's very important you have a conversation with your broker to find out if you purchase within the approval, will they still honor my approval?
Beautiful, great tips. Thank you for joining us with the market segment. Look forward to having you on as a guest again shortly. Thanks, Adish.
Thanks, Steve. It was good.
That's all for this show. In the next 3 weeks, we'll be having our panel specials with experts from legal, accounting, mortgage and finance brokers that will cover major issues in 2023, such as finding builders, wealth creation with property and investment properties. Hope you can join us.